Every time there's a meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, the commentators reach for the exact same script. They look for daylight. They're hunting for tension. They're inventing riffs. They're trying to project insecurity. And every single time, they misunderstand the most basic truth about the relationship between Washington and Jerusalem. This is not a relationship built on a show of public harmony. It is built on shared interests. At times, there are private disagreements, but most importantly, strategic coordination, especially when the stakes are highest. So today, as everyone analyzes the President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu meeting at the White House, I want to focus on one thing: how the pundits got it wrong again. Not last year, not 5 years ago. I'm not talking theoretically. Again, right now, as we watch over Iran. Let's start with how this has been framed over the past few weeks. On February 9th, Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, read, "Rushing to Washington. Will Netanyahu press Trump on Iran or fall into step?" That headline tells you everything. Either Prime Minister Netanyahu, in their view, is pressing Trump, meaning there's tension, or he's falling into step, meaning Israel is subordinate. There's no category in the worldview for partnership. Then Haaretz again, 6 days before, reported that Netanyahu warned Steve Witkoff that Iran has repeatedly proven its promises cannot be trusted. Wow. Isn't that incredible? Like, Steve Witkoff and President Trump never thought that maybe you can't trust Iran? This is the same president who tore up the Iran deal, who sanctioned Tehran and ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani. He built his entire foreign policy brand on confronting Iran. And somehow now he's going to need Israel to explain that Iran is lying. This is not analysis. This is projection. It's assuming Netanyahu is arriving in Washington to educate President Trump. Now, that assumption is not just wrong, it is simply lazy. Because if you want to know whether Israel should be worried about Trump's negotiations with Iran, don't read the op-eds. Watch the actions. In the past days alone, President Trump has moved forward with the 25% tariffs on countries doing business with Iran, which is exactly what he said he would be doing. He publicly floated the option in front of the world of deploying a second U.S. aircraft carrier strike group to the region. Now, that is not the posture of a president that's being duped by Tehran. That is the posture of a president negotiating with leverage. And this is exactly where the pundits consistently fail. They treat diplomacy as vibes. They treat negotiations as psychology. Trump treats them as pressure campaigns. He talks and he backs it up with force. There's dialogue that is backed by deterrence. Now, this is not new. This is classic Trump doctrine. And guess what? Israel knows this, which is why Prime Minister Netanyahu, he didn't fly to Washington afraid. This is about something much, much bigger. But before we discuss that, let's first of all discuss the most revealing moment of all. The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit will take place April 15th to 17th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in Jerusalem. Register today at jnssummit.org and use the coupon code JNSTV, that is JNSTV, one word, to receive 20% off all tickets. I look forward to seeing you in Jerusalem. Ali Larijani, a senior Iranian figure, posted directly to the Americans on X. He warned the Americans not to let Netanyahu teach them the framework of negotiations. He urged the Americans to remain alert to the destructive role of the Zionists. That tweet is not commentary. It's a confession. Iran only fears one thing more than American power aligned with Israel. Larijani isn't worried that Netanyahu will convince Trump. He's worried that Netanyahu doesn't need to, because the fundamentals are already aligned. Iran understands the U.S.-Israel relationship better than the pundits do, which is why Iran is trying desperately to manufacture daylight. Now let's rewind. because we've seen this movie before. Let's go back to May and June 2025. Headline after headline told us the exact same story we're hearing now. Trump warned Netanyahu not to strike Iran. That was from Reuters, Fox News, Al Jazeera. There were reports of heated phone calls in the Times of Israel. Sharp disagreements. Trump is restraining Israel. Netanyahu is defying Washington. Haaretz openly speculated whether Trump would dump Netanyahu. Reuters framed Israeli action as undermining Trump's peacemaker image. You know, in June, before the war, the pundits were ecstatic. They finally had their daylight. And then, boom, reality hit. Despite all the noise, despite the public disagreements, the United States and Israel moved into the deepest military coordination against Iran in the shared history of the two countries. Israel attacked and degraded Iran's operational and strategic infrastructure. We saw it as the key components of their nuclear military system were hit. The core elements of Natanz, their enrichment complex, blew up. Facilities that were linked to uranium conversion and fuel processing, their air defenses and command and control nodes, senior IRGC operational commanders taken out by drones, all of it was simply coordinated and happened together with the United States. And then, critically, the United States entered the fight directly, and the American forces struck Iranian nuclear facilities. You can argue about later assessments of that operation, and you can debate timelines, but one thing is absolutely indisputable. The pundits were wrong. They were dead wrong. The rift narrative collapsed under the weight of the facts. What they mistook for distance was coordination happening beneath the surface. So why does this keep happening? Why are the pundits constantly getting it wrong? Because the pundits misunderstand the idea of partnership. They think that allies have to agree publicly to agree strategically. They think disagreement equals weakness. They think friction means fracture. But real alliances, think about people you care about, people you have real discussions with. Serious alliances, they don't work that way. The US and Israel argue because the relationship is strong, not because it's weak. They argue because everything is on the table. Daylight is not disagreement. Daylight is silence. Back in the days of Obama. Daylight is when concerns aren't shared, when red lines aren't coordinated. That's when surprises happen. That is not what's happening now. This is an alliance in full conversation. So what is the Trump and Netanyahu meeting really about? It's not because of a narrow Iran deal. It's not because Netanyahu is worried. They're meeting because we are approaching a strategic inflection point in the Middle East. Iran is weakened, and they're going to be further weakened. Its proxies are degraded, and a regional vacuum is forming. And as we know, nature abhors a vacuum. The question isn't whether there's going to be a new order. The question is who's going to shape it. The United States, the superpower led by President Trump, and Israel are coordinating right now how to preserve their interests, deter aggressors which are threatening the world, prevent actors like China, Russia, and North Korea from exploiting this chaos. Now, this is not crisis management. This is strategic planning. If you want a historical analogy for the moment we're looking at right now, it's not a press conference moment. This is a Yalta moment. Yalta, 1945, the meeting between Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. They convened to decide the political and security order of Europe after World War II. Not to fight the war, but to shape what came next. It shaped the spheres of influence, the post-war boundaries, the balance of power that defined the years following World War II. Yalta wasn't about winning the war, it was about shaping what came after. And this is not the first Yalta meeting between the two men. It's the 7th in 14 months. Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing something Israel has not always been trained to do, to think beyond survival, to think beyond the next strike, to think about the future architecture of the region. And that requires coordination with the only superpower that matters, led by President Trump. And that coordination is happening, whether the pundits see it or not. So no, there is no daylight here. There is debate, there's honesty, and there is strategy. The pundits got it wrong in May 2025, and they got it wrong in June 2025, and they're getting it wrong now. And the people who understand this best, it's not Haaretz columnists. It's not Western left-wing commentators. It's actually Iran, which is why they are trying so hard to convince you otherwise. Don't believe the fake news.